ahora vamos a buscar la retrospectiva hacia Afterlife de Citadelle de Morts, que básicamente este güey que se llama Afterlife, este güey lo conocí el año pasado como a mitades y fue un creador de contenido que me gustó porque, o sea, tiene un nivel de diseño, ya me trabé, un diseño de nivel de edición, digo, ni sé qué chingo estoy diciendo, un diseño de videos, o sea, en edición brutal, literalmente. Y básicamente, justamente el día de ayer, creo que esta madre, su video de aquí de retrospectiva hacia Citadel, había salido, si no mal recuerdo, unos cuantos minutos antes de que acabara el stream anterior, o sea, el de ayer. Por lo que, pues, dura una hora, literalmente, la retrospectiva. Así que me imagino que este After le metió muchísimo empeño hacia el video. Así que, pues, vamos a reaccionarlo a ver qué tiene que decir con Citadel. Que bueno, el título dice: ¿acaso Citadel de Morts ha fallado en alcanzar su full potencial? O sea, su completo potencial. Así que pues vamos a darle.
The long and storied history of Call of Duty Zombies.
A ver, espérate. Vamos a poner. A ver, bueno, a ver, quiero ver si. O sea, creo que básicamente se me está trabando un poco. Quiero ver si mi PC no está chupando tantos recursos. Sí, no tanto. Es que bueno, creo que es por el wallpaper engine. A ver, déjenme cerrarlo para que no me gaste mucho, porque también estoy viendo que la gráfica está utilizando muchos recursos. O sea, el OBS está usando muchos recursos de la gráfica, no sé por qué. Pero pues, a ver. Vamos a ver. Ah, por cierto, está en inglés. Está en inglés, por cierto. O sea, no me voy a pasar tratando de traducir qué es lo que dice. O sea, si veo cosas que me llaman la atención ahí, voy a tratar de explicar qué es lo que dice, pero pues, anyways. Así que, la gráfica, estoy cansado, jefe, literal. Ya necesito una nueva gráfica, mi 20 ya no puede. Ponle subtítulo, a ver, pues, ¿tiene subtítulos automáticos? O sea, tiene IA esta madre, a ver. Opciones, bueno, a ver. No, tiene subtítulos en español porque veo. A ver, pues.
The long and storied history of Call of Duty Zombies is full of twists and turns, especially when it comes to the first major DLC map releasing in the game's seasonal lifecycle. This is a chance for developers to make a statement to the fanbase on what their game is about, perpetuating concepts from launch maps while innovating on ideas from previous Zombies experiences spanning over the last 16 years. And while innovation seems simple on its face, as soon as we dig a little deeper, we often learn it's anything but, as the push and pull between Treyarch and the Zombies community tends to be quite erratic, as over the years developers try their damnedest to find the perfect ingredients that make Zombies content. Enter in Citadelle de More, the first DLC map for Black Ops 6 Zombies, firing on all cylinders by taking advantage of the momentum from the mode's highly successful release. This Zombies experience takes many of the brilliant ideas Treyarch has implemented in previous Zombies titles by presenting them in a more modern fashion, while feeding into the accessibility era that Kevin Drew and other developers are heavily leaning into, with of course some surprises hidden beneath the map's surface. But what does this mean for Citadelle? Does it lack the depth, identity, and replayability fans have become accustomed to? Or has Treyarch brought the Zombies mode to heights unseen? Well, let's blow the doors off of this castle to find out if Citadelle de More has failed to reach its full potential.
A ver, veamos, After, ¿qué tienes para mí?
The exact dimension. It is not far.
When thinking about the launch of any upcoming Call of Duty title, I always wonder what exactly is going through the developers' minds. Because on one hand, the core launch content, things like campaign and multiplayer, needs to push the boundaries of what the players are used to, but that innovation has to be built upon an infrastructure of familiarity so that the players are not drowning in a sea of never-before-seen mechanics. This is an impossible standard to adhere to, as the developers toe a line of alienating the simplicity or roots of what made the franchise franchise great, but they're also boring people with repetition of the same old gameplay loop. And as I'm sure you are aware, this is a dance that we have seen repeatedly over the years that inevitably leaves some segment of the fanbase disappointed.
Eso sí es cierto, eso sí es cierto. El hecho de que básicamente siempre el gameplay se ha repetido muchas veces es algo que la comunidad se ha estado quejando. Principalmente ahora vi acá un comentario acá en el desde que puso a ver.
Repeatedly over the years that inevitably
Aquí está esto, de que básicamente Cold War 2.0, esto no es Black Ops 6, porque Black Ops 6, mira, porque Black Ops 6 se ve muy realista, ese tipo de cosas. Porque, o sea, algo que recuerdo bastante, que cuando se anunció Black Ops 6, por allá, principalmente zombies, recuerdo que hubo mucha gente quejándose de que esto se parecía a Cold War 2.0. Me acuerdo perfectamente que hubo muchísima gente quejándose de esto. Principalmente porque, si no mal recuerdo, Cold War había tomado un enfoque de mostrar el juego a base de gameplay. Y como Black Ops 6 tomó ese mismo, entre comillas, camino de mostrar cómo se ve el juego a través de su gameplay, obviamente hubo muchísima gente que, obviamente, pues no se le hizo raro el hecho de que básicamente el feeling era demasiado similar con Cold War. Aunque eso sí, ese era, entre comillas, trailer gameplay. No era así gameplay así del propio juego en sí. Por lo cual, pues, cuando vi a esta gente que se estaba quejando de básicamente esto de que se parecía muchísimo a Cold War, lo primero que pensé yo, sinceramente, fue como de que, güey, o sea, ¿por qué te vas a poner a criticar si literalmente todavía ni ha salido el juego? Y lo más importante, todavía no hemos tenido el Code Next. Que en el Code Next fue cuando se reveló básicamente el gameplay de zombies en Liberty Falls. Y ahí fue cuando básicamente ahí ocurrió un chingo de cosas cuando se reveló el gameplay. De que se veía demasiado simple. Se parecía muchísimo a Cold War 2.0. El mapa no era literalmente uno de zombies. ¿Qué otra cosa? El HUD literalmente era bastante simple. Un montón de cosas tenía. Bueno, un montón de cosas ocurrieron en ese día. Y recuerdo perfectamente porque, si no mal recuerdo, creo que 1 o 2 semanas después de ese incidente hice un video en mi canal principal hablando sobre de eso. Principalmente hablé sobre de las quejas que esta gente estaba haciendo y lo, entre comillas, sobre exagerado que se me hacía que esta gente estaba reaccionando, porque técnicamente el Code Next, esa parte que se mostró, era una, entre comillas, build, una alfa barra beta, que no era el producto final, era un producto que todavía no estaba terminado. Y si no mal recuerdo, creo que habían cosas si no mal recuerdo, en el Code Next, en Liberty Falls, que hubo cosas que todavía no estaban en el producto final. No recuerdo muy bien qué cosas faltaban, a diferencia del lanzamiento ya final, pero sí le faltaba mucho a Liberty Falls. Sí le faltaban muchas cosas por lo que vi en el Code Next. Sí recuerdo perfectamente eso, pero verga.
inevitably leaves some segment of the fanbase disappointed.
Train go boom.
Now, when it comes to zombies, the same sentiment surely applies, but there usually is a bit more wiggle room when it comes to creativity, or at least there used to be, but we'll touch on that later. Over the years, the launch zombies experiences were more or less designed to level up the zombies franchise in some way, shape, or form. Whether it was Keener to Toten tightening up the gameplay loop after Derice, Transit trying to push open world gameplay, or Shadows of Evil's unique blend of new and old mechanics, along with a Lovecraftian
sí, mira, eso es lo que había dicho antes, güey, antes de iniciar este video. De que básicamente zombies, güey, con cada nueva entrega, güey, con cada nueva entrega, nuevo mapa, metía nuevas cosas que lo hacía, pues, cada vez diferente y único. Aquí Afterlife lo demuestra obviamente, con Black Ops 1, con Keener to Toten, a pasar con Black Ops 2 con Transit y Black Ops 3, con Shadows of Evil con el modo BS y ese tipo de cosas.
Deco stylization, which was quite controversial for the time, there was always something alongside these cutting-edge pieces of content to make the medicine go down a little easier. Because let's be honest here, a lot of people are not interested in accelerated change inside of their video games, which is why Treyarch tends to pair their more imaginative content with easygoing maps like Farm, Nuketown Zombies, and of course, The Giant. But it wasn't until the next and first DLC map where Treyarch would continue to push their experimentation ever so slightly over the edge, while officially declaring what Black Ops Zombies Zombies would look like for that particular year. Now, we can argue until we're blue in the face about whether or not the changes that DLC 1 map packs brought to the table were a net positive, but to say that no innovations occurred at all is just not true. Ascension brought the franchise's first main quest, updated special enemy rounds, new perks, and equipment. Die Rise continued with Zelensky's unique map design while also introducing verticality. Die Rise and Drac leveled things up drastically with not only the map's art design, but brought some of the best elemental wonder weapons we have ever seen to date. They also introduced the first ever main quest boss battle inside of Treyarch Zombies, a new precedent that obviously...
Sí, cierto, güey. Me había olvidado por completo que Dead Rising Drag fue el primer mapa que metió boss fight. No me acordaba de eso. Ya, o sea, literalmente también aquí fue, literalmente en Dead Rising fue cuando entre comillas, se hizo ya común el hecho de que básicamente ya todos los mapas de zombies después de Dead Rising empezó a haber, ¿cómo se llaman? Boss fights. Fue algo que neta sí me gustó bastante. Porque, o sea, después de la batalla del Keeper con The Rising llegó la batalla de la araña en Setsubo, la pelea con el dragón y Nikolai en Gorod Krovi, la boss fight contra Shadowman en Revelations, y luego después llegó Blood TD con la pelea de Brutus. En Classified no hubo nada porque Classified era un mapa más enfocado en supervivencia. Y luego, Alpha Omega llegó con el Abogadro, que literalmente el Abogadro era el enemigo de Transit, que ahí sí se me hizo una mamada, de hecho, de que básicamente estaba ahí en Alpha Omega. Y luego, en Tag der Totem no había boss fight. En Tag der Totem solamente había como un tipo holdout con el dispositivo Asgardiano, una mamá. Si no recuerdo muy bien el nombre del dispositivo, pero es el dispositivo que básicamente Nikolai utilizó para destruir la llave de invocación y mandar todo el tema de el universo en ese entonces, del éter al éter oscuro y un montón de cosas. Y luego después llegó Firebase con el Horda, luego llegó Outbreak con su primer DLC, con su primera, entre comillas, boss fight gigante, que básicamente esa recuerdo perfectamente que fue difícil la madre. Que tan difícil fue que literalmente me acuerdo que días después literalmente Treyarch la ultra nerfeó porque sí estaba bien cabrón. Y luego llegó Mauer de Totem con la boss fight de Valentina. Luego Forsaken con el propio Forsaken, que básicamente era el que controlaba el éter oscuro en ese entonces. Y luego pues tenemos actualmente lo que tenemos en Black Ops 6, bueno, también estamos en Warfare Zombies, pero pues esa madre creo que no la cuento, porque pues sí es lo que tenía boss fights, pero no sé, o sea, siento yo que no está como que parte de la fórmula de cómo es. Y luego está, actualmente como está ahora sí, Black Ops 6, que está, el paciente 13, si no mal recuerdo se llama, en Terminus, y en Citadelle de Morts pues tenemos al guardián. Pero sí fue algo que neta me gustó, güey, el hecho de que añadieran boss fights en zombies. Porque hacía que los easter eggs se hacían como que más entretenidos y cada vez más desafiantes. Más que simplemente hacer cositas sencillas como presionar botones, agarrar cosas, colocar y ese tipo de cosas.
Escalated magnificently throughout the Black Ops 3 lifecycle, and there are so many more examples I can showcase here. However, at the end of the day, the result usually remains the same, as Treyarch's DLC 1 plans of perpetuating innovation percolate to the surface. And so now that we understand these game development fundamentals, the question then becomes, does Black Ops 6 Zombies follow this same blueprint? Well, the answer is mostly yes, but there seems to be a bit of friction between the stances of the developers and various segments of the community regarding ideas of profoundness or ingenuity. It is true that all of the major gameplay and map innovations were focused on Terminus to establish the foundation and direction of BO6 Zombies, which was then paired wonderfully with Liberty Falls, making it that much more palatable Zombies experience for the masses. But now that Citadelle de More is here, Treyarch should be following suit of what previous DLC 1 experiences did. right? Well, like we just discussed, overall, it's mostly true that the developers absolutely delivered, but there are quite a few underwhelming instances which were perhaps overlooked by Treyarch, leaving me often scratching my head befuddled. And so on one hand, while I think it's clear that the core mission of DLC 1 was successful, I would be lying to you if I said that there weren't some glaring problems inside of the overarching package that have me hesitating to say, I know where this game is now going. When DLC 1 was teased at COD Next, the dev team was clearly excited about the upcoming experience, which gave fans hope that our crew was going to be going somewhere a little different in terms of location. This paired with the fact that Treyarch had specifically told content creators that each location throughout the DLC 1 lifecycle was going to be original and not a standard facility like we saw inside of Cold War Zombies. And while BO6 Zombies' art direction and map design is
Y eso fue algo que mucha gente, incluso yo mismo, me estaba quejando demasiado. El hecho de que básicamente, de que todos los mapas de Cold War eran literalmente una instalación. Eso fue algo que no solamente a mí no me gustó, sino que a toda la comunidad no le gustó para nada. Principalmente porque todos los mapas después de D-Machine en Cold War eran literalmente mapas totalmente sacados y editados de la campaña. Porque, o sea, si no me recuerdo, Fire Race sí estaba basado en una campaña, en una misión de la campaña que se llama Fracture Jaw, si no me recuerdo. Y luego, Outbreak, pues básicamente era todos los mapas de Strike, de Strike grandes, o sea, de presiones grandes de multijugador. Y luego, ¿cuál era el otro mapa de Berlín? Power de Totem, estaba basado de la misión de donde tenemos que como que sacarle información a un güey en medio de Berlín y básicamente es como una misión de sigilo. Y luego está Forsaken, que básicamente esa misión está basada, bueno, el mapa está basado en la misión de donde tú como jugador vas con Woods en ¿cómo se llama? Vas como que con Woods adentro de una instalación de rusos para sacarle como que fotografías de lo que está haciendo Perseus y ese tipo de cosas. O sea, fue algo que neta no me gustó para nada el hecho. Aunque bueno, en cierta parte creo que puedo entender lo que ahí pasó. Porque como Treyarch en aquel entonces, con Cold War, como básicamente es Activision les dio un año menos para desarrollar Black Ops Cold War, y combinado con el tema de la pandemia y ese tipo de cosas, obviamente se les hizo algo muy, muy, muy complicado, pero demasiado. Cosa que es algo que yo personalmente puedo entender, porque al fin y al cabo, pues, como, ¿qué es lo que puedes hacer como un estudio? Porque, o sea, tienes que básicamente hacer ahí todo lo que puedas para literalmente, pues, hacer un producto bueno. Eso al chile es algo que es entendible. Es algo entendible eso acerca de lo que le pasó a Treyarch con Cold War. Que básicamente no tuvieron mucho tiempo, no tuvieron los recursos suficientes. Y principalmente con la orden que les dio Activision del hecho de que básicamente tuvieron un año menos. Fue literalmente lo peor que les pudo haber pasado a Treyarch. Pero bueno, no tanto como lo que fue con Black Ops 4. Lo de Black Ops 4 siento yo que ese aspecto fue peor que el de Cold War. Fue muchísimo, muchísimo peor. Ah, cabrón.
Off to a solid start, as both Terminus and Liberty Falls are special in their own ways, they still lacked the mystique and otherworldliness previous maps before them had displayed. So when it was revealed that Citadelle des Morts was going to be taking place inside of a worn-down French castle, the community's ears began to perk up, as this appeared to be the first time since 2019 that zombies had been let off the leash. When you watch the promotional material for Citadelle des Morts, the first impression of the map is that it is saturated heavily inside of a chaotic whirlwind blend of supernatural storytelling. And to a certain extent, that is true. There is the sun peeking through the rolling fog, disheveled architecture all around you that has been tagged by teenagers and other derelicts. There are even subtle hints of the castle feeling alive, with these chests that rock back and forth, implying some sort of danger if you break them open. It's beautiful, eerie, and unsettling all at the same time. The inception of this castle began in 750 AD, where it was known as the Abbey des Oublis, aka the Abbey of the Forgotten, where it served as a leprosarium to house those suffering with the horrific disease of leprosy. But its history doesn't stop there, as it survived construction of a keep by the Queen of France, the hiding of secret relics from the Crusades, and even off-target bombings during World War II. However, as of now, it currently rests under occupation of the French syndicate, who have molded it into a large-scale narcotics operation where they both create and sell their product. What is wonderful about Citadelle des Morts is you can feel that something is off here from the moment you step into the premises. When the player first loads into the map, we spawn inside of a large courtyard with an enormous statue looming overhead, and while it's clear that this statue has something to do with the main quest, it's not so obvious how to activate whatever secret it may be holding. A tavern and cellar area are located at the back end of the spawn room, which bring about a lovely quaint tone that reminds you this village was once populated with citizens not too long ago, despite the fact there is a large glowing portal on the wall, but we can suspend our disbelief for just a moment, can't we? That theme continues as from the spawn area. The player is able to take one of two routes, a dirt road which leads up to a small barn, the other a cobblestone street aligned with shops, apartments, and a wishing well. Whichever route you decide to take, the view is breathtaking, and the level of detail lining each path are shimmering with that unmistakable Treyarch polish. Once inside the castle walls, things start to become a little more serious, as there are remnants from the French syndicate lying everywhere. Piles of drugs, cutting agents, and other paraphernalia lay out near Melee Macchiato, while a communications room near Elemental Pop sits empty over top one of their vans near the entrance of the courtyard. But underneath all of the syndicate's mess lies the disgruntled history of the castle, as messages written in blood are smeared all over the walls, oil traps hover gracefully atop the castle's crumbling brick ledges, while a beautifully designed lion cannon patiently sits just begging to be fired. And while our new old friend wants us to not make a scene when entering the castle, it seems like our crew has other plans.
Our comrades will find a way. Comrades, please, make it a quiet way.
The portcullis is now in mere splinters, while the larger chunks of charred wood sit aflame as we finally make our way into Citadelle des Morts. While it would have been cool to fight a horde of zombies or a slew of doppelgasts after blowing down the entryway, this idea was really clever in terms of the overarching narrative themes that take place inside of the larger Dark Aether story. Our crew is tired, restless, and determined to capture Richtofen no matter what the cost, fitting snugly into their no-holds-barred mindset. Plus, it's also a really stellar way to enter into a zombies map. But once inside the castle, it's clear that things are tense, as there is a strictly claustrophobic setting right from the jump. Interestingly enough, due to the high ceilings, staircases, and ability to loop around the entrance hall, the first impression Treyarch wants you to have is that the castle feels like there is plenty of space to move around. But the further you push into the castle, you realize that is most certainly not the case, but we'll touch on that a bit later in the video. The art design continues to be some of Treyarch's better work since the days of Black Ops 4, with the main level highlighting different features regarding the map's history and current day illegalities. The dining hall showcases the suits of armor along with the unexploded bomb from the off-target bombings during World War II. Sitting rooms lay adjacently on the other side of the castle wall, where it looks like the French syndicate foot soldiers laid in wait while curating their narcotics. The alchemical lab is a centerpiece inside of this castle, which is completely sealed up using fake stone walls. This is a beautiful area with a warm glow of candlelight, while hinting towards the dark sorcery left behind from those who were here before us. But that's not all, as the bowels of Citadelle des Morts are fully accessible, as attached to both the dining hall and the sitting rooms are two pathways which lead you deeper into the castle. The Undercroft and dungeon area are both repulsive sections where you wouldn't dare to send your most formidable enemies. The Undercroft in particular holds roughly ankle-deep water that has been there for God only knows how long, with decaying historical artifacts resting in its corners. The dungeon is also grotesque in its nature, as the prison prison conditions are barbaric, but the cooler temperature lighting makes things seem a bit less daunting as a passerby. Both of these areas lead to the oubliette, likely the main room for the French syndicate's drug smuggling operation, as kilos stack the tables alongside jars of chemicals, test tubes, and other materials needed for chemical synthesis. Clearly, Citadelle des Morts is a very visually appealing map that not only caters to the eye-candy stylization that Zombies fans have been typically used to from over the years, but it does so in a mostly original fashion by using French history, magic, and the degeneracy of the European drug trade. And while Treyarch's art department executed their vision stupendously, the main quest, narrative, and atmosphere, on the other hand, are purely surface level and are lacking that depth and detail normally paired with a map that is perceived to be as fantastical as this. As once you start diving in and the cracks begin to appear, it becomes quite obvious that the exploration and magic that we have seen in such peak experiences like Origins, Drak, and Ancient Evil, it all vanishes into thin air, making the beauty of Citadelle des Morts purely skin deep.
Al chile sí. Lo que neta sí me gustó, güey, cuando jugué Citadel por primera vez fue literalmente la atención a detalle que literalmente Treyarch le metió demasiado a Citadel. O sea, todos los detalles que le metieron, o sea, recuerdo que la primera vez cuando salió el mapa, no recuerdo si lo streameó o no recuerdo muy bien eso, pero sí recuerdo que cuando salió y lo jugué por primera vez, me puse a analizar todo el mapa de cómo se veía y literalmente me gustó muchísimo el nivel de detalle tanto de diseño artístico como de literalmente cómo se ve Black Ops 6 en los gráficos y todo. Me gustó muchísimo cómo neta se ve Black Ops 6. Me gusta demasiado. O sea, me gusta cómo se ve Citadel literalmente. La que sin duda alguna me gustó más de Citadel, o sea, de su apartado artístico, fue sin duda alguna lo de el tema Underground, o sea, como que los calabozos, literalmente se veía un nivel así de diseño bien cabrón, que literalmente, güey, cuando lo vi, me recordó demasiado a cómo jugué Terminus por primera vez y tuve ese feeling similar de inmersión. Fue algo que neta me gustó bastante. Fue algo que me gustó bastante, aunque eso sí se me hizo... Lo único que casi no me gustó de Citadel fue que siento yo que le faltaba como que un poco de interacciones como de mundo abierto como estaba Terminus y Liberty Falls. Como por ejemplo, algo que me gustó, güey, de Terminus demasiado fue el hecho de que habían guardias que salían de por ahí, estaban ahí como que sobreviviendo a través de los zombies. Y básicamente tenías la opción como que de dejarlos morir o salvarlos. Aunque bueno, si los salvaste comenzaban a atacar y luego llegaba como que el Electro Oscuro y se los llevaba a otro lado. O sea, siento yo que aquí en Citadel se pudo haber hecho lo mismo, pero con los guardias del sindicato. Porque como en la introducción del mapa, en Citadel, se ve que pues Franco, el líder sindicato de ese entonces, que obviamente Maya le tiene un poco de rencor, pues dice que pues están atacando, los zombies están atacando a sus hombres, lo cual hubiese estado con madre el hecho de que básicamente eso pudo haber pasado, pero pues parece ser que el trailer decidió no hacerlo, aunque eso sí, es una pequeña área de oportunidad pequeña, no es una grande, nomás digo eso. Realmente es algo que siento yo que le pudo haber faltado, pero aún así del resto estuvo muy bien.
Things that makes Zombies maps so special is the unique way that stories have been told inside of the mode. This largely has to do with the DLC cycle with a new map coming out every few months. But despite that large gap in between content, Treyarch had always found a way to make it work. The recipe is a blend between housing a primary narrative that spans throughout the entire year by bringing new chunks of that story from map to map, as well as having a self-contained story with underlying subplots baked into it. This has always been executed by using in-game cinematics, radios, writings on the wall, walls, in-map character quotes, and the map's main quest to help sell the map as its own unique zombies experience. This would not only serve to make the map more eventful, but would also help develop the characters, making their individual arcs more compelling. And when looking at Citadelle de More on paper, it uses this same page out of the COD Zombies playbook, but unfortunately Treyarch leaves so much meat on the bone here that Citadelle ends up having many missed opportunities, which is such a waste when you think about how much potential the setting and storyline could truly offer. But first things first, we need to understand why our characters are here at this castle and what their purpose is inside of it. Well, at the end of Terminus's main quest, we had destroyed Patient 13, which then revealed a cutscene where we learned that Richtofen was obsessing over the Sentinel artifact and looking into a mysterious substance known as Prima Materia. Gabriel Kraft had also been kidnapped and tortured by Sergei Ravenov, an old ally now working for the French Syndicate. He was doing this in order to pull answers from Kraft about the Sentinel artifact, as Richtofen was paying the Syndicate to find information and or the location of this alchemic legend. And while it's been amazing to see the Chaos, Vanguard, and Cold War storyline threads weave together so effortlessly, there are quite a number of cliffhangers here to leave on both Liberty Falls and Terminus, implying that the next map, in this case DLC 1, has some big narrative shoes to fill. And based on what we've discussed in this video so far about the precedent that DLC 1 sets, this means Treyarch needs to answer some of these bigger narrative questions, bring about new information for the fans to theorize about, while also holding a self-contained story all at the same time. This is no easy feat.
Eso sí es cierto. Como por ejemplo, uno de los misterios que ahora mismo tiene Black Ops 6 es, o bueno, tiene dos, es primero, ¿a dónde madre se fue Richtofen después de la cinemática de Liberty Falls? Y la segunda es sobre qué chingados pasó con Panos. O sea, el científico este a ver, que rescatamos entre comillas rescatamos de el Liberty Falls en su easter egg, que básicamente al final nos traicionó y nos dejó atrapados en el éter. Son preguntas que todavía no tienen respuesta. O sea, me imagino que obviamente con al mediado de los DLCs va, con DLC 2 o DLC 3 ya se va como que, entre comillas, a responder esta pregunta con, ya sea con intents en el propio mapa o con, básicamente, el propio easter egg de esos mapas posiblemente. Pero eso sí, se me hace, I don't know, un poco raro el hecho de cómo Treyarch va a llenar, porque estas cosas no son fáciles de responder. O sea, tienen que haber motivos muy, muy grandes. Ay, güey. Motivos muy, muy grandes de estas teorías. Como por ejemplo, he estado viendo supuestamente que según Black Ops 6 va a tener como 5 DLCs al final, como si fuese Black Ops 3. Aunque eso sí, eso de tener 5 DLCs al chile sí lo dudo mucho. O bueno, anteriormente lo dudaba demasiado, pero ahora que principalmente The Tomb va a llegar a inicios de temporada 2, cosa que se me hizo muy, muy rara. Porque literalmente Citadelle de Morts salió a mitades de la Season 1. Se me hace muy, muy raro que The Tomb salga literalmente justo apenas después de Citadelle de Morts. Por lo cual, posiblemente esta madre del DLC 5 posiblemente sea real y pueda ocurrir. Pero pues creo que mejor no doy mucha opinión de eso porque, repito, es una, entre comillas, teoría. No digo de que va a ocurrir. Ya veremos en el futuro si eso se cumple o no. Eso lo veremos luego.
Treyarch needs to answer some of these bigger narrative questions, bring about new information for the fans to theorize about, while also holding a self-contained story all at the same time. This is no easy feat, but it's DLC 1 we're talking about. And while Citadelle de More does follow suit here, the map barely scratches the surface on any of those parameters other than providing middling resolution to an uninteresting subplot and introducing even more questions after the main quest was solved, which we will touch on in a few moments. When our crew arrives in Citadelle, they stumble upon a drunken Ravenov who, by all accounts, has undergone some radical changes in his life as he went from one of the most upstanding members of the Cold War cast to a drunken criminal torturing people for cash. Clearly, he is surprised by seeing Weaver, Gray, and Carver, as he believed them all to be incapacitated in one way or another. But he was mostly taken aback by Peck being present, as not long ago they were mortal enemies fighting through the Cold War and for humanity itself, diverting both Peck's war Warheads and the Forsaken away from he and Kravchenko. Weaver states the purpose of their arrival and that they are looking for a man named Gabriel Kraft, where Ravenov then replies that he is not only a prisoner, but the French syndicate was paid millions of dollars to find and torture him to learn about the information he was holding at any cost. This particular detail doesn't hold much weight in the early moments of the intro cutscene, as it would make sense Richtofen would pay exorbitant costs in order to find the Sentinel artifact in the source of Prima Materia itself. But later, we will learn just how much deeper Ravenov's initial throwaway line goes. Maya also has her own individual reasons for coming to Avalon, as the leader of the French syndicate, Franco, is partly responsible for sending her brother Nathan to Terminus, turning him into the monstrosity we killed during the mid-quest boss fight. As the player begins to navigate through the map, Treyarch pokes and prods at our nostalgia while the characters have a slightly tense and pensive reunion. We then blow down the doors to get inside, unlock a caged beast to reveal a bloodstone to open up Pack-a-Punch, only to finally stumble upon Kraft as a disheveled, caged, and broken man. However, when he sees us, his head perks up as he recognizes us, knowing why we are here and what the purpose is of our mission.
Pues sí se me hizo muy raro, güey, cómo al final Kraft terminó, güey, al final. O sea, de cómo pasó de Vanguard directamente a este momento, güey, se me hizo muy raro.
The Sentinel artifact. You will first need an amulet hidden in this castle.
That is more than I could get from him all week.
Listen closely. Up in the Oculus tools. I gave you the means to find the amulet. Now hurry. The Syndicate cannot be allowed to obtain the Sentinel artifact. It must never fall into his hands.
As you can see, there has been a lot of buildup in setting the stage here, as this is vitally important to the claims made earlier in this video about this zombie's experience looking fantastic on the surface, but as soon as you begin to peel back its layers, everything begins to fall apart. While the Sentinel artifact is our ultimate goal, Kraft had mentioned that in order to find it, we would need to acquire something else first, an amulet that was hidden by Guy de Saint-Michel, who had 4 bastard sons who were constantly seeking their father's attention. Guy de Saint-Michel, also known as the Owl, was a man with an outstanding reputation and responsible for convincing those in power that the Knights Templar were committing heresy, where the final knight remaining of the Knights Templar was burned at the stake in Paris. However, the Owl had escaped to Avalon with the help of his illegitimate sons, whose names are lost to history, but his secrets are buried deep within Citadelle des Morts. This castle clearly has such tremendous history baked into it, but if it wasn't for Treyarch's blog post, some quotes from Kraft, and a few pieces of intel left lying around, you'd never know, as the presentation of all of this wonderful magic and torment is essentially hidden from the player by the overriding goal of accessibility via simplistic gameplay mechanics. All this to say, in order to find the amulet, we need to complete puzzles that the Owl has left for his bastards, meaning we need to unlock each bastard sword, upgrade it to the corresponding elemental variant, while also seeking out another magical item known as incantations. To pick up any of the bastard swords is as easy as waiting until round 10 to kill a zombie wearing a knight's helmet, picking up a stamp that dropped from him, and then interacting with whichever particular sword the player feels like upgrading. And now we have seen steps like this before where zombies possess an item and we have to wait for that zombie to spawn in to then collect that item. One of the more obvious examples to this would be in Zetsubou no Shima, when the zombie is holding onto that green vial that we need to build the wonder weapon. In a vacuum, this isn't an issue, but inside of Zetsubou, this is one of 3 items needed to collect in order to build the KT-44, and inside of Citadelle des Morts, this is just a passive item that drops for each sword, making the initiation of the step so underwhelming. Once the stamp has been used, the knight holding the sword simply moves a bit to then present the base bastard sword to the player, and other than a nice music cue to emphasize this is a special moment, there is nothing to indicate the potential power this weapon can behold. And this continues within each of the upgrading processes as well, as the fire or dragon sword simply has the player interact with 3 flaming cauldrons and run back to the castle. The light or lion sword has us kill 4 glowing parasites to then cast that glow onto a secret room where we complete a very underwhelming puzzle. The shadow or raven sword has us complete a very simple puzzle while collecting alchemical symbols by transferring them into dark ether portals.
Bastante simple, güey. Esa madre literalmente me dio un dolor de cabeza cuando lo intentaba resolver, güey. Al chile no lo entendía ni madre. Al final tuve que ver un pinche tutorial de cómo sacar esa madre porque, güey, te juro, güey, no podía, güey. El paso de la espada de oscuridad, güey, neta, no podía, güey. Está bien difícil, no lo entendía ni más de siquiera lo que tenía que hacer. tenía que básicamente como que hacerle como que coincidir los símbolos de la estatua con los elementos de agua, viento, tierra y otro elemento más que no me acuerdo, pero son 4. Que básicamente, güey, al chile esa madre no le entendía ni madres y al final dije, nah, güey, voy a sacar un pinche tutorial a la chingada, güey, no voy a pinche darme dolores de cabeza con básicamente con una jodida espada, güey.
Portals, where the sword then enters the Dark Ether only to return more powerful. The Lightning or Stag Sword has us complete a mini lockdown of sorts, transferring lightning strikes to medieval lightning rods so that the sword can then soak in its energy. Unlocking and upgrading each of the swords is a relatively simple process, and to be quite honest with you, the lack of difficulty isn't really where the problem lies. It's the display and presentation of the quest steps that's arguably worse than any other elemental wonder weapon upgrade that we have seen in Zombies history outside of maybe the Machine in Voyage of Despair. Whether it's Origins, Dreisendrach, Ancient Evil, or even Alpha Omega, the art design and production of making these weapons feel epic is in the little details with how information is dealt to the player. Inside of Origins, you have Samantha chanting in your ear how you're so close to securing the keys, entering the crazy place through these magnificent portals, all while solving puzzles and collecting souls for these powerful elemental stabs. In Dreisendrach, the Wrath of the Ancients is acquired by feeding 3 dragon heads that come alive from stone, while solving cleverly crafted puzzles that tell a story of the demonic trapped in the castle, or of a wolf who yearns for his master, as well as the unique gameplay steps like flying through the air to craft a star on the bastion, or mixing lightning and fire while wall running with anti-gravity. Each upgrade process is vivid, epic, and forever stuck in your mind. But Treyarch wasn't done there, as right before the player retrieves the final upgraded bow, we fill up a chest with zombie souls, and a beam of light shoots out towards the sky as the bow then hovers ever so gently, waiting to be picked up so that you can slaughter the undead. Ancient Evil also has simplistic steps similar to Citadelle des Morts. However, each gauntlet has their own altar and base upgrade sequence, as well as specialized locations players teleport to in order to complete a challenge to prove that they are worthy of the gauntlet's upgraded variant. And while Citadelle des Morts swords are stylish and powerful in theory, the journey to build them is milquetoast at best, and this becomes even more underwhelming when you learn that there is no further upgrade path to them. Whereas a map like Ancient Evil takes the gauntlets a step further, allowing players to upgrade them to an exalted level, satisfying the craving for those who like longer or challenge.
Es que bueno, a ver, yo realmente no siento, güey, que las espadas ocupasen quiero hacer ahí un punto. No, creo yo que las espadas no es totalmente necesario que sean mejorables. Porque al fin y al cabo, güey, pues, o sea, tienes melee macchiato, que básicamente te sube el ataque melee. Por lo cual, pues, si combinas eso, güey, con las espadas, pues, medio que la mejora, güey, no hace cierta parte sentido. O sea, sí es cierto que puede mejorar un poco su ataque especial, pero realmente siento yo que lo, entre comillas, importante es el ataque melee en sí, no tanto del ataque especial. Y pues siento que melee macchiato, pues, como ya cumple ese rol de mejorar el arma, pues ponerle un ritual, siento yo que eso medio que no hace tanto sentido realmente, porque solamente lo único que va a hacer es que el arma se sienta más OP, el juego se vuelva más fácil y pues todo el mundo use esa strat, cosa que obviamente en Black Ops 6, pues con la filosofía que tiene ahora mismo, pues no puede hacer, porque o sea, como Black Ops 6, desde que salió, ha tenido la costumbre de que Kevin Drew ha dicho que quiere que esta sea la experiencia de zombies más difícil posible, pero a la vez disfrutable. Por lo cual, si desbalancean una cosa, obviamente, pues va a ocurrir como lo que sucedió con Cold War, que fue todo al principio muy difícil, pero con todas las mejoras que le metieron, se hizo cada vez más y más fácil, hasta el punto que ya literalmente ya no requería skill. Por lo cual, pues ahí siento yo que ahí, pues, hace sentido el hecho de que no hayan metido bofeadas a las espadas. Eso es lo que yo siento realmente.
Challenging quests inside of their maps. And I suppose that this wouldn't be too big of a deal as long as Treyarch created another set of weapons that were genuinely amazing, but instead, developers used that secondary wonder weapon slot for something even worse: incantations. Usually inside of most maps, there are a few upgrade paths for a majority of wonder weapons. This could be the building process itself along with pack-a-punching the wonder weapon, or it could have a secondary upgrade quest that makes the weapon stronger. We have seen a lot of variations over the years, and Citadelle des Morts is again again, no exception. Treyarch has simply taken the concept of a second upgrade path for the sword and created what they call an incantation. Now, conceptually, the incantations are not a terrible idea, but they're certainly not exciting. And in fact, I believe out of all of the upgrade pathways inside of Citadelle, in terms of spectacle at least, the incantations are more exciting than the swords. The fire incantation has us utilizing some sort of fire tool to light these small bonfires which spawn in zombies, and eventually a doppelgast that will drop the Ankh of Ra from the Chaos story. The lightning incantation can be acquired by shooting down a horseshoe from the barn using the cannon to fast travel, where then lightning will strike the player as the horseshoe will fly across the map and then become the Horseshoe of Pegasus. The shadow incantation requires a Ravenclaw to be found, and if the player fast travels down the oubliette slide to spawn, a raven is sitting inside of that sewer, and when it is shot, the raven will drop his claw. The light incantation can be crafted by shooting a few crystals around the map that beam light to a specific area, where eventually a paladin's brooch spawns waiting to be collected. Once all of these pieces are collected, they need to be placed in specific areas around the map, where the player will then need to kill zombies and collect their souls to fill the incantation chest. And in order to open these chests, we will need to use the matching elemental sword. And while these steps are much more clever and engaging than the swords, and have much more personality while upgrading them, their issue is that they are incredibly lame tools to use, as they are simply alternate ammo types reskinned to take the player's equipment slot. In terms of the actual vitality of these wonder weapons and incantations, there is certainly a case to be made that they are powerful and useful for taking out zombies, but we're going to touch on that in the gameplay section of this video, so let's put a pin in that for now. While it's true that the wonder weapon upgrades are missing the fantastical presentation comparatively, this wouldn't really be as big of a problem if the upgrade process itself didn't roughly take up half of the main quest. It's the combination of both this blasé simplicity mixed with the fact that after we upgrade these weapons, the number of puzzles and challenges to complete are minimal. Now, that being said, this second half is when things really kick up. However, it's very short-lived despite it being very good game design. The player needs to break down a wall hidden inside of the Undercroft area, which reveals alchemy symbols that need to be shot in numerical order based on a simple logic puzzle from inside of the tavern at spawn. Once the code has been entered properly, a red orb that was trapped behind the wall gently hovers out, revealing a second hidden altar holding an ancient relic where the player places down 4 pages, each with a corresponding point of power trap symbol etched into the parchment. We then have to find and use the correct traps and kill zombies while doing so, and after all 4 traps have been cleansed, the orb will release from the last trap, traveling and revealing to what appears to be a secret chamber with one last riddle to solve. At this point in the main quest, I have to hand it to Treyarch. They really took the historical ancient magic artistry to great heights by having players use clever and interesting methods to reveal the key to this final puzzle. As I'm sure most of you watching this are aware, each armor suit has to be inflicted with its own elemental incantation and then saluted using their upgraded sword's inspect animation. Once all 4 knights have been honored, which is something that they had all been yearning for from their father.
Ese paso, güey, el de dispararle con los elementos e inspeccionar el arma, eso sí fue un paso que realmente me gustó, güey. O sea, el hecho de dispararle con el elemento, luego inspeccionar el arma y que luego la estatua interactúe, fue algo que neta sí me gustó, güey, demasiado. O sea, aunque sea un paso muy, muy simple, sí me gustó bastante.
The owl, a mystic orb floating in the sky comes out of thin air, hovering down to head level while being upheld by an unknown energy from each of these bastard knights. This is exactly the right way to showcase just how important and mysterious a step is in a main quest. And although it isn't perfect, it has players using all of their resources and intuition in order to crack the code, where we are then rewarded with the result ceremoniously. From here, we need to take the mystic orb to each of the incantation locations to perform a challenge of sorts which fill the orb up with soul energy. The process of this step is ultimately okay, despite it lacking a bit of creativity, all things considered. Out of the 4 challenges, the light elemental challenge is the only one that is unique, where you need to run through the orbs to release that soul energy so that it can be collected. But the other 3 elemental types just need the player to either kill zombies with incantations or a fully charged wonder weapon. I'm just not really sure why Treyarch thought it was a good idea to not have more unique aspects to the step to make it feel not only more epic, but a little more challenging as well. I know accessibility is important to them, but so is variety and overcoming adversity through these puzzles. And instead of each orb location having a fun and individual obstacle to go alongside the soul harvesting, we end up with another mediocre step that does just enough to keep players engaged.
Eso sí es cierto. Es algo que no me gustó, güey, del paso de los orbes fue el hecho de que solamente el único que se sentía especial era el de, si no me acuerdo, el de León. Siento yo que era el único paso del orbe que era diferente los orcos. O sea, los otros aquí, como ya había dicho After, eran todos tipo mata zombies con encantaciones o con el ataque especial de la espada. Fue algo que neta no me gustó. Porque, o sea, ahí había habido una oportunidad de así de variación. Que al final pues trae más aprovechado. Aunque eso sí, no digo de que aquí, como dijo After, que aquí dice que es un paso mediocre. Yo no lo veo tanto como mediocre. O sea, está entretenido, pero no tanto como para llamarlo como un paso mediocre realmente. Siento yo.
However, once the orb is completely full, the player must take it to the secret area to finally open it up. Here we can see that there is a lair or study where the owl must have hidden away in order to collect his thoughts, or perhaps it was just to leave this message to his sons. The message that begins to play is just more manipulation from the owl to his bastards, speaking in a manner that could truly apply to any of them, congratulating them, stating that they're the sole winner to this carefully hidden riddle, further perpetuating this illusion that their father thinks that they are special when they are anything but. However, he also tells them that he has hidden the amulet inside of the Guardian and that it needs to be defeated in order to gather this reward. The player can then grab the Guardian key lying on the table and make their way back to spawn to activate the final boss encounter. The Guardian is of course the large monument in the center of spawn. The owl had placed a curse on it so that if anyone did make it this far in order to grab the amulet, they would have to face this monstrosity. And so here we are. Slamming us into another dimension, we begin trying to take down the beast in one of the best boss battles we have ever had in Treyarch Zombies history. The use of stone armor on the Guardian that when broken reveals weak spots is a nice touch mixed with his violent, aggressive nature, making things feel not so bullet spongy and more based on this amazing omni-movement system that Black Ops 6 Zombies has to offer. What's really wonderful about this boss is that once he has depleted enough health, he will go into a lockdown phase where the owl speaks to whom he thinks is his son, letting them know how weak and pathetic they are. It's a really nice touch. And after each cooldown phase from the Guardian, he comes back even more aggressive with more movesets than before, while the boss arena itself begins to shrink in size as lava pulls in, causing damage to the player if they stray too far, meaning that you have to stay up close and personal to this boss while being on your A game. This is a boss fight that no matter how many times I play it, I barely make it out alive and my heart is beating out of my chest. And while I wish there were a couple of adjustments made to make the fight have a mix of damage-based gameplay and specific phases, I still think that overall it is an amazing boss fight, and hats off to Treyarch for executing everything so well.
Sí, o sea, sí, la boss fight de Citadelle, sí, o sea, con el guardián sí se me hizo muy épico, pero siento yo, personalmente, que le faltó un poco más de dificultad. Digo porque, o sea, creo que ya lo había mencionado antes, cuando dices el easter egg por primera vez, recuerdo perfectamente que lo había hecho en ronda 39 y se me hizo para mí, aunque ronda 39 ya es algo difícil para un easter egg en Black Ops 6, sí se me hizo muy fácil realmente. Muy fácil. O sea, no tuve nada de problemas con matar al boss fight ni nada de ese tipo de cosas. O sea, tenía la escopeta automática, por lo cual lo hice. O sea, en cierta parte me lo hizo fácil, pero también había partes que medio no tanto. Pero al fin y al cabo, güey, la boss fight sí se me hizo algo fácil, muy. Siento yo que algo que le pudo haber gustado, me pudo haber gustado en la boss fight fue que hubiesen metido un poco más de dificultad como con el guardián del Keeper en Dead Rising Drag. O sea, porque, o sea, en el Keeper, adentro de Dead Rising Drag, hay un momento en el cual el Keeper, hace un ataque especial que básicamente te hace insta-kill. Y la única forma que puedes como que evitarlo son dos. Que es o escondiéndote detrás de las piedras, que ahí tienes que tener mucha suerte para que no te afecte. O la más común, que es usar la DG2 Ragnarok, o sea, como que los pinchos estos de 115, colocarlos abajo de él y que así se stune y así cancele el ataque. Me hubiese gustado que el guardián hubiese tenido como un ataque similar, pero como que con el martillo, o sea, de que como que no sé, de que de repente como que se pone en el centro, se queda como que quieto y que luego como que se empieza como que a ver como un tipo de cargado de energía en el martillo y que tienes que como que no sé, intentar hacerle todo el daño posible para evitar que eso pase. Y si en caso de que eso pase, o sea, de que vaya en cancelar el ataque, de que el guardián, salta muy alto, le pega al escenario y literalmente instaquilea a todos. Eso es algo que me hubiese gustado, güey, porque se le hubiese metido un poco más de dificultad. Pero como ya te lo explico que básicamente Citadelle de Morts está más enfocado en accesibilidad a ese tipo de cosas, creo que Treyarch no se quería atrever a ese tipo de cosas. Aunque eso sí, el concepto, como dije ahora mismo, hubiese estado muy interesante que lo hubieran metido. Ese concepto como el de The Ryzen hubiese estado muy, muy cabrón. Pero demasiado.
As I'm sure you could assume, once the Guardian has been defeated, the amulet is now ours for the taking, and then the ending cutscene will start to play. This cutscene is rather dramatic, showcasing the death of Kraft getting killed by zombies, which essentially makes our efforts to save him as a prisoner all for naught. But we do learn some more information about where the next location is for our crew, along with the fact that Kraft had been withholding a secret from us this entire time. And while Kraft is lying there bleeding on the floor, he mentions to utter with his one last gasping breath, oh, shit. That was the wrong clip. Sorry, guys. Here we go.
Please. Please don't
Que
kill
viene.
him. He is my son. He's your what?
This is a wild revelation and shows just how depraved and sick Richtofen is, as he will clearly go to any lengths to secure himself a better tomorrow. And it's clear that Kraft forgives Richtofen despite being tortured by his own son, as even after everything that has happened here, Kraft is now begging them to not kill Richtofen. And you can see the looks of confusion upon our crew's face when hearing this request, as one of the primary goals here is retribution, as not only Richtofen betrayed Requiem, but he locked them up in Terminus and manipulated Maxis as well. In terms of the main plot, all of this sets...
Y eso sí hablamos de que literalmente el Richtofen actual, güey, el Eddie, es literalmente el Richtofen Ultimi. O sea, literalmente la versión de Richtofen más jodidamente cabrona y enferma. Literalmente... Hablando de un poquito de la relación de Kraft y Richtofen, ya había hablado eso en mi video de retrospectiva hacia Citadel. Sí recuerdo bastante, el hecho de que básicamente yo sabía en un principio que obviamente Kraft iba a mencionar que Richtofen era su hijo, pero aún así sí me sorprendí bastante. Eso ya lo había dicho antes, pero sí me sorprendí bastante el hecho de que obviamente, pues, al final, aunque de todo lo que Richtofen le hizo a Kraft, todavía lo en cierta parte lo perdona. Se me hace algo muy, muy, muy triste el hecho de literalmente cómo tu propio hijo literalmente como que te traiciona. O sea, se me hace como que muy, muy raro y no tengo como que palabras para describirlo. Se me hace... O sea, siento como una impotencia. Literalmente con tan solo hacerme como que esa idea. Siento una impotencia por sentir eso.
Up the future of the Dark Ether story in a very promising way moving forward, as now Treyarch has plenty of room to breathe and hopefully takes us to some amazing locations as this narrative continues to blossom. With all of that being said, we still need to circle back to what the purpose is for DLC 1, as well as the important markers of what makes a zombies map exceptional. Citadelle de Morts misses out on a great opportunity to carry out its own unique story in a much more epic way, while also pushing the larger plot of Black Ops 6 Zombies forward. And rather than drive Citadel's story exposition through the gameplay and main quest, the developers used a blog post to do the heavy lifting. And I know it's not all bad, as we've touched on how the developers' art direction here is magnificent, from the chilling and sinister tone all the way to the unique boss arena and enemy design. There really isn't much to pick apart. Also, learning about the connection between Kraft and Richtofen was very exciting, and the fact that a dig site is mentioned in the cutscene teasing the new DLC 2 map, that's also quite interesting. These subtle nods towards Origins and the leftover Chaos story pieces make for quite compelling content, so no issues there. But there are still many questions to be answered, such as what happened inside of Liberty Falls with Richtofen getting trapped in the Dark Ether, not to mention everything going on with Samantha Maxis, and we can't forget about Project Janus security team
sí,
and how
eso es
they
lo que
were
había mencionado hace un
bamboozled by
momento.
Dr. Pericles Panos.
Pero las teorías sobre de qué pasó con Richtofen y con Panos que todavía no tienen respuesta. Eso es cierto, o sea, todo el mundo pensaba que obviamente con DLC 1 iba a responder estas dudas, pero parece ser que todavía no, todavía tenemos que esperar hasta que tengamos respuestas sobre qué chingados pasó con el Panos y qué pasó con Richtofen. habrá que
There
esperar
are now
todavía.
so many balls being juggled in the air, the story could really go anywhere, which has both its fair number of positives and negatives, but to reiterate, what we are discussing now is deeper and missing from Citadelle's core identity, because while there is a lot of greatness to sift through, we know from previous experiences that Treyarch is capable of so much more, and I think it's really important that we talk about it. If we look at Treyarch's previous works, we can learn quite a bit, as inside of Der Eisendrache or Ancient Evil for example, while the player is navigating through the main quest, there are other characters inside of the storyline that are taunting us, getting upset with us, or begging for our help while even rewarding us for our trouble. This can be seen in the case of Dr. Groff, the Oracle, or Perseus, but inside of Citadelle there is all this hullabaloo about the owl and his bastard sons, but you wouldn't know how important it is if it weren't for the blog post or the fact that Kraft is sparingly telling us about them over the radio. And if the owl is truly an important historical figure who took down the Knights Templar and crafted an entire puzzle for his bastard sons to solve, then why isn't he speaking to us while we are going through his ruse? Imagine for a moment that he trapped his spirit in the castle, and once activated by us, he realizes we are not his sons and then creates even more difficult challenges for us to overcome, taunting us while we are upgrading the swords, hiding things in different locations around the map, or altering the order of the soul boxes for the incantations. Just something to make it feel like we have an antagonist of sorts other than going after the looming threat of
Eso sí es cierto. Sí siento que faltó. Hubo muchísimas áreas de oportunidad que siento que Citadelle falló. Como por ejemplo, algo que realmente no me gustó fue el hecho de que pusieran todo el contexto del mapa, o sea, la historia, el background y todo eso, al mero blog post. Eso fue algo que no me gustó, porque, o sea, a ver, sí es cierto que lo hacía más fácil, pero recuerdo originalmente que esto fue algo que descarté de mi retrospectiva hacia Citadel. O sea, bueno, retrospectiva para review, de que cuando salió quería como que intentar como que contar el backstory de Citadel, o sea, todos sus eventos y cosas, y te juro, no encontraba ni una pizca de información sobre de cómo era la historia y ese tipo de cosas. No fue hasta que cuando ya subí mi video, obviamente sin eso, múltiples semanas después, me di cuenta que en realidad el jodido backstory estaba en el propio blog post. Yo literalmente no sabía eso. Te juro, o sea, si me hubiese dado cuenta antes, pude haber metido eso, pero pues al final no lo metí porque al final pues no podía, pues, porque o sea, pues no sabía nada de esto. Y o sea, al chile sí siento que ahí hubo sí o sí un jodido downgrade. O sea, si hubiesen metido Intel y ese tipo de cosas adentro del propio, o sea, en el in-game, ahí pues sí podría saber, pero en un blog post, pues, güey, no mames, güey. ¿Eso quién se va a dar cuenta? Eso no hace ningún sentido.
Richtofen, whom we haven't seen since the intro cutscene of Liberty Falls. Because if this amulet is so damn special, you think there would be a bit more omnipotence inside of the castle if the end goal is to retrieve it. We get a brief glimpse of what this could be like during the final boss fight while the Guardian locks down in between phases, and it's so fucking sick. I can't imagine how much more badass the main quest would have been knowing that we are being harassed and at the mercy of this once powerful entity. Now, we have already touched on the lack of creativity when it comes to upgrading the swords by using other maps as counterexamples, and this same thread of problematic creativity can be applied in other ways throughout Citadelle de Mor. The Alchemical Lab, while it's clever on the surface to have it hidden behind a secret wall, when you combine this with the shallow depth alongside the other aspects of the quest, it makes you wonder why aren't there more hidden chambers, or why wasn't this Alchemical Lab a little more tricky to open? Perhaps Kraft or Ravenov could have alluded to it from overhearing Franco talk about it, or maybe we...
Eso sí es cierto. El hecho de que había, o sea, de que el laboratorio de alquimia era un lugar secreto que solamente se activaba cuando activabas el poder. Ahí sí fue un concepto interesante que, teniendo en cuenta que Citadel pues, es un castillo que, entre comillas, tiene magia. Ahí ese tipo de cosas sí pudieron haber aprovechado como lugares secretos. Así tenemos el laboratorio de alquimia y el lugar donde recogemos la llave para enfrentarnos al guardián, pero son ubicaciones muy pequeñas y siento yo muy específicas. O sea, siento yo que podían como que no solo explotarlo, pero sí podían como que añadir pequeños, entre comillas, y side easter eggs que involucren a habitaciones ocultas de ese tipo. Si hubiesen hecho eso, ahí hubiese sido un concepto interesante, pero parece ser que, pues, Treyarch no lo hizo. Parece ser que se le saltó. O sea, ahí había una área de oportunidad muy, muy grande, pero anyways, parece ser que se les olvidó, se les saltó.
We could have found blueprints of the castle showcasing secret rooms that all have puzzles to open them, as just getting near this wall automatically makes it disappear, requiring no effort to actually get in. Something else that's disappointing is the naming of the Pack-a-Punch area being called the Oubliette. This is by definition part of a castle that is accessible only from a trapdoor on the ceiling, but instead, the Oubliette is accessed by buying a door. It's small things like this that can turn a simple gameplay mechanic from average to exciting. And while Treyarch hasn't done anything wrong by implementing these features the way they have, I can't help but feel uninspired by some of these choices, as even the Lion Sword secret room is useless along with the Owl's hidden chamber. Why didn't Treyarch use these spaces more throughout the Easter egg, or at the very least, why couldn't we have used these spaces for camping, or just to have open as a fun reward for solving the map's main quest? Now, the last thing I want to touch upon is Maya's storyline, as this whole side quest, or whatever you want to call it, was implemented so strangely, making it hard to figure out where to place it inside of this review. I would like to establish first that I love in-game cutscenes, mid-game boss fights, and any other sort of unexpected twist like this that flips the core Zombies main quest gameplay loop on its head. Now, earlier in the video, we discussed how at the end of Terminus, Maya learned that Franco was here in Avalon, which is why she wanted to tag along so she could kill Franco for imprisoning and mutilating her brother. And Treyarch went all out with this sequence, and while I would much rather have this in the map than not, the execution of this entire scene is very out of place and doesn't quite feel earned, mostly because I think the devs focused on all the wrong elements that make things like this so special. So right after we interact with Kraft, Maya is able to seek her revenge by going up to the second floor of the dining hall and knock on a door where Franco is hiding behind. She tricks him into opening it, and the player is able to wander down a number of tight hallways while killing zombies along the way. Eventually, Maya makes her way to Franco by blowing down a locked door as he sits on the ground, cowering in fear, accepting the reality that life is nearing its bitter end.
Why won't you just fucking die? Wait! Killing me won't bring your brother back. You know he wouldn't want this.
This isn't for Nathan. This is for me.
Now that is straight up a beautiful cutscene, ain't no doubt about that. But what is its actual purpose? Did it even have to be made? Well, I would argue no, it doesn't serve a purpose, and I think it didn't have to be made, and that it was only made just to have a cool cutscene, which, like I said, that's fine. Now,
sí, pero también siento yo que lo que aquí falló fue el hecho de que lo hicieron como algo, entre comillas, opcional, porque realmente en el easter egg esto no pasa realmente, o sea, esto lo tienes que hacer totalmente opcional controlando a Maya para poder hacer esta, entre comillas, escena. Algo que obviamente, pues, si estás usando otro personaje que no sea Maya, pues, medio que esto siempre te lo vas a saltar, o sea, por ejemplo, yo nunca entre comillas, easter egg para hacer esta cinemática, yo nunca la he hecho, literalmente, porque yo realmente casi nunca uso a Maya. Solamente ha habido, bueno, hace unos días, la última vez que ayer fue cuando estábamos streameando llegar a la ronda 100 en Citadelle, que llegamos a las 73. Empecé a usar a Maya principalmente porque quería ver cómo es, principalmente porque básicamente Maya, estuve viendo que de entre la comunidad de zombies en Black Ops 6, la gran mayoría prefiere usar entre Weaver y Maya. Y pues quería ver pues cómo se sentía usar Maya hace unos días y pues en cierta parte sí, siento que de momento la he estado disfrutando cómo usar a Maya como con Weaver. Me gustan literalmente esos dos personajes. Pero repito, esto siento yo que Treyarch lo implementó de una muy, muy mala manera, regresando al tema. Lo implementó muy, muy mal. O sea, si lo hubiesen metido como adentro del easter egg mientras, no sé, Franco estaba intentando evitar que nosotros consiguiéramos el artefacto. O sea, el artefacto o bueno, la llave, o lo que sea barra para conseguir el artefacto que tenía el guardián. Ahí sí o sí pudo haber una oportunidad de que esto, pues, casi no se pudo haber sido salteado. Pero como Treyarch lo implementó así, de manera opcional, Ay, güey. Ahí sí la cagó, pero bastante, bastante.
Obviously, the go-to comparison here would be Ancient Evil, as it's clear that's where Treyarch drew their inspiration, and for good reason, as it was an excellent mid-game cinematic. But the reason the mini cutscene worked so well was due to a number of reasons, one of them being the fact that the Chaos Crew were excellently written, but also because it was part of the main quest, it only activated when playing as Bruno or Shaw, it was an act of betrayal from Bruno that caused Shaw to become an active participant against his will, and it also made sense to the overall plot as it introduced a new problem of potential subversion from allies who now lack the ability to control themselves. However, when it comes to Maya, I know we're supposed to be on her side in this situation, but her story has barely been fleshed out, and Treyarch wants us to feel this deep-seated hatred and revenge sowing in her heart while she pursues the men who wronged her, and I get that, but for any of that feeling to transfer to the viewer or the player, we need more than generic tropes or blog posts to help get us there. We also know barely anything about Franco other than he is a generic villain and is part of the reason that Nathan's body and mind were butchered, but what were the reasons behind Franco's actions? Give us the ability to...
Eso es cierto. El hecho de que básicamente no nos explicaron casi nada de la relación entre Franco, Maya y Nathan, casi no hubo nada de explicaciones realmente. O sea, si siento yo que Franco lo hubiesen movido como que, no en Citadel, sino que lo hubiesen movido como en un par de mapas después, como, no sé, en DLC 3 o 4, junto con Richtofen, posiblemente ahí, cuando se desarrolle la historia, podríamos entender un poco y tener una pequeña conexión, pero aquí sí se siente muy, muy, muy apresurado y literalmente no, así nomás para como que para meter un poco más de acción y momentos épicos a la trama. Eso sí fue algo. Eso sí es algo que aquí siendo mudo que tiene After. Aquí sí tiene un muy, muy buen punto que eso no lo había tenido en cuenta.
empathize with him as well. This would be helpful as compelling villains are ones you can relate to but ultimately know are in the wrong. But as far as Franco goes, we have no real reason to hate him viscerally. And while the cinematic is masterly crafted with epic acting and has all of the visual works, once the murder is finished, the now shallow puddle of a subplot is all dried up, implying that Maya has no real reason to even be with us anymore since her business with our crew is ostensibly complete. This theme is constant throughout the entire main quest, where the activities in Citadelle de Mor are just good enough, showcasing that there is no problem with the secrets in this map, but again, it's all about how these features are implemented, which is subpar. This lack of imagination outside of the core gameplay loop is really antithetical to the peak era of zombies between 2015 and 2019. And don't get it twisted, this isn't even me advocating for the Black Ops 4 style of Easter eggs. While I would personally love that, I am merely attempting to remind Treyarch that the maps themselves are also characters in their own right, which need to be developed alongside the gameplay and narrative so that the thematic nature of these experiences come to fruition via the main quest challenges, puzzles, and Easter egg steps. And again, whenever the first Zombies DLC comes to the game, it's supposed to tick many boxes by not only building off of the excellence of a game's launch, but to also kick things up a notch by giving the map its own isolated story, solidifying the artistic vision of the season, as well as pushing the main plot forward. And while the 50,000 foot view of BO6 Zombies' core storyline is interesting and was executed well through Citadelle's main cutscenes and intel, the depth and nuance inside of previous Zombies experiences clearly show what can be done, making it a bit disappointing when the fruits of Treyarch's developmental labor fall shy of the finish line.
Se me acabó el Nvidia Overlay.
The core gameplay loop is where the map really shines and utilizes the atmospheric tensions much more advantageously compared to the main quest. The fog makes it difficult to see the vermin and parasites, bringing a chilling sensation on the first few playthroughs, as the map's close quarters and many spawn locations make it tough to discern where they are really coming from. The guttural whine from the Doppelgast as he is barreling towards you while juking your shots is both tense and thrilling. And last but not least, zombies crowd around players so quickly that if you don't have a planned escape ready to go at a moment's notice, notice, you will be knocking at death's door, unless of course an amalgam decides to quickly snatch you at the last second. We've all been there. Ultimately, what makes the
Sí, eso me ha
gameplay loop
pasado
so
muchas
enjoyable
veces.
is of course the baseline Black Ops 6 zombies mechanics, but also the level design. And what I find to be most compelling about Citadelle's layout is the juxtaposition between the density and narrow nature of the map's insides and how jarring it really can be, where then the player can just merely take a few steps beyond the castle gates and have an almost freeing experience, allowing you to run around or train until your heart's content. This serves a variety of purposes, creating a situation of risk and reward by allowing skilled players to hoard zombies in tight spaces to churn through rounds quickly, but if you'd like a bit more space, that is also a viable option. This allows players to take their time to achieve whatever goal they are pursuing. But even if you do choose to travel to a more open area, players still need to exercise caution, as now there is more room for zombies to swarm you with the BO6 zombie spawn system at play, making it wise to keep certain sections of the map closed off if you want to use these more spacious locales. What's ironic about all of this is that the areas that seem the most daunting at first glance end up being more friendly to player engagement, such as the oubliette, the undercroft, or even the dungeon. And this is again why the word irony comes to mind, because the spaces players think they should be using don't function in the fashion they've typically intuited and or potentially have repercussions for engaging with them as such. All this to say that this would naturally entail a higher skill ceiling to master Citadelle, at least mechanically speaking. Treyarch also ensured that traversing the map was easier than ever, which in my opinion is always a good thing. Whichever way players want to maneuver through the map, it is completely possible. There are multiple fast travel points that bring players to key locations, which allow quick escapes and also makes navigating the main quest quite fun when you optimize it correctly. And even if using fast travels really isn't your thing, it's not that big of a deal, as running around the map is a completely viable option and doesn't take away from the core experience at all. It's no secret that high rounds in Black Ops 6 are in a
mi
bit
tema
of a weird
favorito. A
place.
ver.
On one hand, they are much more difficult than they were in Cold War, much more varied than they were in Black Ops 4, but they're not nearly as versatile as they were in Black Ops 3. There is a lot of abusing exploits, which can be a bit annoying, but overall they heavily rely on the use of mutant injection spam, which is a poor solution to the perceived problem of making high rounds more difficult and or balanced. However, Citadelle de Mort has some of the best high round gameplay in Black Ops 6 so far. There are a multitude of strategies to get up to the high 60s or even 70s. This can be done simply by training and hoarding up zombies in those tight and closed spaces we talked about a moment ago, which can lead to some really enjoyable, fast, high-round gameplay, and it's just that adrenaline-pumping fun that's really addictive about COD Zombies. It's also completely viable to train outside by the barn on the dirt path, as leading zombies up and down through the path loop makes for an opportune moment of hoarding up the undead underneath the gate for a quick and simple slaughtering. This is much different compared to Terminus and Liberty Falls, where training into the 60s and 70s is not really a safe option due to the drastic difference in level design, where things are either super tight-knit or over.
Sí, o sea, el problema que tiene Terminus y Liberty Falls es que básicamente son mapas, bueno, Liberty Falls no tanto, pero Terminus sí siento yo que es un mapa casi muy compacto como para literalmente hacer trenes de zombies y literalmente moverte por el mapa y básicamente hacer los trenes clásicos y matar zombies y subir drones así. Es muy, muy difícil. Y en Liberty, casi, o sea, sí también tiene, algunas partes que son como, muy cerradas, pero sí hay cierto que hay algunas partes que sí son muy abiertas, como por ejemplo, el área de entre Staminop y Flopper, ahí puedes trainear muy, muy fácil, pero sí es cierto que ahí es un problema principalmente porque, como allí en esa área hay muchos spawns de zombies que llegan en muchos, muchos lados, es muy, muy arriesgado el hecho de subir high rounds en ese lugar, porque básicamente te llegan de todos lados. Y lo digo por experiencia porque yo originalmente, antes de usar la strat de high rounds de usando las piezas de injections cerca del área de los polos de Staminop, yo usaba esa área y literalmente sí en un punto se volvía muy, muy difícil. Principalmente cuando estaba todavía la época en donde Treyarch no había nerfeado los spawns de los manglers. O sea, todavía no he jugado Liberty Falls desde hace mucho tiempo, después del, entre comillas, nerfeo. Me gustaría algún día volver a jugar Liberty y checar si esa strat que hacía yo personalmente sigue jalando y ya sí es un poco más disfrutable. Eso ya dependerá a ver si ya no es así. Pero regresando al tema, en Citadel sí, literalmente sí se siente que puedes hacer cualquier cosa para trainear zombies. Principalmente antes de que yo hiciera la, comillas, strat de campeón, la de usar el Sigma en las catacumbas y luego usar las Mutant Injection en el bar. Recuerdo que yo subía de rondas, principalmente usando la espada de fuego en el mero spawn, porque como la zona es muy, muy grande y a la vez, en algunas partes se puede como que medio controlar, aunque bueno, sí llegan a un punto como en ronda 60 o 50 que ya casi no es controlable la situación. Sí es cierto que en ese punto, antes de esos momentos, sí es muy, muy controlable. Principalmente antes de que lleguen los super sprinters. Y porque, o sea, usaba yo la espada de fuego y pues me clearaba a todos los zombies y, güey, disfrutaba bastante, güey, el hecho de hacer trenes ahí y ese tipo de cosas. Sí es cierto que me molestaban los enemigos especiales, que básicamente era el Double Gun Gas, o cómo se llama esa madre, porque al chile no sé. O sea, el pendejito de los tentáculos. El pendejito de los tentáculos, básicamente sí me molestaba un poco, pero a la vez sí lo disfrutaba bastante. Eso fue algo que sí o sí me gustó muchísimo de Citadelle en Hiron, si no, literalmente no tenía que ponerme, o sea, tener que apoyarme con lo que sería sistema, el sistema de killstreaks de Black Ops 6 y el campeo. Eso fue algo que me gustó muchísimo de Citadel. Fue muy, muy, muy disfrutable.
Overly open to their detriment, thus relying on cheap tactics and exploits. Not to mention the addition of Vulture, which has essentially enhanced the high round experience inside of BO6 writ large, but it also really suits the aggressive map design of Citadel quite nicely by allowing players to replenish their equipment slot with relative ease. This not only allows for things like decoy grenades and Casimirs to be re-earned quickly, but gives players an opportunity to save their salvage for the late game, which of course leads to the mutant injection strategy. And even though the mutant injection is a get out of jail free card, the core strategy of mixing Casimirs, field upgrades, and wonder weapons is something that requires a decent amount of skill, focus, and practice, showcasing that the traditional high rounding experience is a little deeper than our first impressions would grant. Oh yeah, I forgot! We actually need to talk about these damn wonder weapons now. Alright, so we've already discussed how the presentation or quest implementation of the swords isn't up to snuff, especially when we take a look back in Zombies history to see how Treyarch curated their quests. And while all of that is clearly super important, none of it would matter if the weapons themselves were completely detestable. And fortunately, they're pretty damn awesome. I don't think they're perfect by any means, but they're very powerful, and with a few tweaks, they could be some of the best wonder weapons in the Zombies franchise. What's been very enjoyable about the sword specifically is that they are similar to the Beam Smasher, meaning that you have to take your time to learn how to master this weapon. They're not something you can just pick up, start swinging, and become a Zombies god in just one match. They are a bit finicky, particular, and each has its own unique set of abilities which cater to different playstyles and player preference. How each sword works is, of course, they have an elemental ability associated with it. Kills will charge.
Aunque eso sí, güey, fíjate que a mí nunca, güey, cuando jugué Citadel, cuando probé las espadas, a mí nunca se me hizo difícil de controlarlas. O sea, sí es cierto que cuando jugué términos con la Beam Smasher sí se me hizo algo, bueno, no tedioso, pero sí algo confuso en cómo exactamente funcionaba con el tema del paralizador que le daba a los zombies y luego disparar ese tipo de cosas. Fue algo que ahí sí, más o menos me tardé en cómo funcionaba el arma y cómo, entre comillas, ¿cómo se dice la palabra? Sacarle todo el potencial al arma. En Citadel, con las armas especiales, o sea, con las espadas, nunca sentí ese nivel como con, términos, con la Beam Smasher. O sea, la espada de fuego que creo que fue la primera que saqué, y la espada de fuego literalmente la saqué antes de que salieran, las guías, ese tipo de cosas, porque yo lo descubrí por mi propia cuenta. Sí se me hizo muy fácil de entender, porque, o sea, es como de que tipo, o sea, básicamente matas a unos zombies como unos, no sé, 20 o 30, esperas hasta que se cargue, pues, la habilidad especial, la lanzas y a repetir el ciclo, así de fácil. A mí no se me hizo nada difícil. O sea, ni el de fuego, ni la variante del león, la de oscuridad, ni la eléctrica, ninguna se me hizo difícil. Bueno, la eléctrica creo que un poco, porque no entendía cómo básicamente funcionaba su ataque especial, pero ya después cuando vi que pues era un rayo, y pues el objetivo de un rayo pues es como que atraviesa más o menos a zombies, obviamente pues el truco era pues hacerle trenes. Ahí fue cuando ya entendí cómo básicamente funcionaba esa arma, pero de esa única arma y del resto, o sea, excluyendo a la variante eléctrica, ninguna se me hizo difícil de controlar. Ninguna, excepto esa, la que mencioné hace un momento.
Charge that ability up, and that can all be indicated by the blade itself, which is super fucking cool. Keep doing things like that, Treyarch. I love that. And once the blade is fully charged, you can either throw the charge shot or continue to kill zombies while that elemental damage spills onto the undead more frequently. The dragon sword is probably the worst of the bunch, mainly because the charge shot isn't prioritizing duration. And since zombies spawn so erratically in this game, it can be tricky to take out whole hordes at a time without missing a few stragglers here and there. The lion sword is a solid choice for all playstyles, as not only does it have a great ultimate ability similar to the Chakrams of Vengeance from Black Ops 4, it can replenish your armor through both regular kills and the ultimate ability activation. And while it would be nice if that main ability lasted a few seconds longer, as diving into a horde of zombies headfirst is just super satisfying, but if you're not careful, you can get stuck. However, the sword does charge up relatively quickly, making it feel decently balanced, if not a bit underpowered. Now, the Stag and Raven sword
Sobre
are
todo
clearly
con la espada de León, ahí sí tienes que de a huevo sí o sí llevar Ether Shield o Forensic Guard, porque literalmente si falla, si se te acaba el de y todavía tienes zombies alrededor, si no tienes esas dos cosas, ya mamaste literalmente. Literalmente no llevar Ether Shield o Forensic Guard es literalmente es un suicidio usar esa arma, literalmente. Literalmente esta es una de mis variantes favoritas, la de León. Más de hecho, creo que en mi retrospectiva o vara review había dicho que esta era mi variante favorita.
best of the four, which is fantastic because they behave so differently. The Stag Sword's charge shot is super badass, as a beam of electricity penetrates zombies and doppelgasts, not to mention melts through the amalgams. It also has one of the faster swings out of all of the swords, making it a dream to use for players like myself that like quick gameplay with amazing particle effects all over my screen. The Raven Sword, on the other hand, has become a community favorite for a reason, as not only does it resemble the days of Black Ops 3 Shadows of Evil with the Apothecant Servant, it's just a blast to use between getting kills, charging it up, and pulling off that satisfying overhead swing and sucking up an entire horde to be sent off to the Dark Ether. Now, while the swords overall are in a pretty damn solid place, I still think Treyarch is missing the mark ever so slightly when it comes to what a wonder weapon's job is supposed to be, which is to save the player's life and looking cool while doing so. And so the main issue with the swords as of now is that they can only kill 2 zombies at a time. And while I think an obvious resolution to this problem would be to increase the amount of zombies you can kill, I don't think it's quite as simple as just turning the dial all the way up. When looking at the Apothecant Sword inside of Shadows of Evil, that weapon was designed much differently than how the Bastard Sword upgrades are treated inside of Citadel. The Apothecant Sword is able to kill multiple zombies at a time while using its charge shot, making it a massive asset for players to use in tandem with the Apothecant Servant. However, the Apothecant Sword was on a timer and required kills to charge it up to even be used in the first place. Thus, since it's a limited time weapon, making it overpowered during that window of opportunity is actually rather balanced. And I think that's a largely fair assumption to make. But the difference is the zombie spawn system inside of Black Ops 6 is fundamentally different and tuned for radical speeds and beatdowns from the zombies at what seems like every second. In any game of Black Ops 6, if you run straight through a spaced out horde of zombies, you will likely get swiped by every single one. And if a zombie runs up from behind you to come in front of the player, you will also get swiped. Well, in Black Ops 3...
Eso sí es cierto, eso me ha pasado muchas veces, porque, o sea, como básicamente el sistema de Black Ops 6, los spawns, es muy diferente a como estamos acostumbrados, o sea, con zombies como con Black Ops 2, 1, World at War, Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4, Cold War. Literalmente, los zombies funcionan de una manera tan inteligente que literalmente usar las mismas estrategias de hace años es no imposible, pero sí bastante difícil de que puedan jalar. Entonces, eso lo de literalmente el hecho de que te llegan, más de hecho creo que eso fue lo que me pasó, güey, el día de ayer cuando estábamos jarroneando Citadelle, de que antes de que me mataran literalmente me llegó una horda de la nada y básicamente porque el juego como que medio sabía que iba a ir a una dirección específica y sabía que no tenía armadura y pues iba a mamar ahí y eso fue lo que me pasó.
Or even Black Ops 4 to some extent, the zombies don't behave in quite the same way, meaning that if you run straight through an open group of zombies, you'll likely not get hit. And the same goes for zombies coming up from behind and to the side of you. So what the hell does any of this mean? And I promise I am getting there. It means that while inside Shadows of Evil, the Apothecant Sword needed to be charged up so that when it actuated, it was on a timer. This meant it had to have an inherently overpowered nature for balance despite having less aggressive zombies. Whereas in Citadelle Day More, we have permanent access to the swords at any given moment, which also required to be charged with kills to use the ultimate ability, but we can't kill as many enemies despite having a much more aggressive zombie system in-game. There is also the fact that the swing speed for the Apothecon sword is the same speed of the sword swing with Melee Macchiato's augment being acquired, which is another point of contention I just don't fully understand when you again look at the speed of gameplay inside of Black Ops 6 and what they're ultimately going for. Am I making sense here? I'd like to think that I am, but I don't even know anymore.
Sí, güey, literalmente lo estás dejando muy obvio, güey. No es necesario que nos lo confirmes.
There is likely some sweet spot in the middle where perhaps Treyarch could increase the amount of kills needed to charge the sword's ultimate ability, but allow us to also kill more zombies simultaneously so that we can combat the aggression from the hordes as well as the numerous amount of them on screen at any given moment. These changes could be adjusted by adding or reshaping augments on Melee Macchiato, or perhaps they could make the base swing speed of the swords as fast as what the augment makes them, allowing us to choose another major augment. I mean, they are wonder weapons after all. Should they not be overpowered based on the systems Treyarch has designed? I know that game development is not as simple as flipping switches, and there are probably good reasons for why Treyarch designed things the way that they did, but again, when you look at the history of the franchise and see how things have been in prior experiences, I can't help but wonder why there appear to be such glaring contradictions. That being said, my real complaints from a gameplay experience mostly reside within the incantations. And now I know we talked about how the quests to build these are good, and that is true, but I just don't understand why Treyarch thought it would be a good idea to make them slightly stronger alternate ammo types. Inside of this map, we have Elemental Pop with its augments, the swords, and the incantations, all with overlapping elemental abilities. And as we discussed in the previous section with the swords, they are largely original feeling with their own unique effects, or at least they are exacerbated from the typical AAT on the player's gun, but the incantations on the other hand, no pun intended, are simply AAT reskins which add to the pile of corpses that is imagination. When building out wonder weapons, they should be more powerful and able to save the player at a moment's notice, which the swords do, but since there was no second upgrade quest, it would be safe to presume that the incantations would have a similar aggressive offensive ability like their counterpart. So rather than having a typical AAT animation, why couldn't each elemental type have its own fully unique ability? For example, the fire incantation could shoot a large fireball out and slowly burn alive the zombies, or perhaps it could have been a flamethrower coming out of the player's hand. The light incantation could possibly suck down the zombies similar to Alistair's Annihilator, leaving a pile of health to pick up when the player is ready. Those are just a few of the ideas that come to mind, which means that actual talented people could come up with way better ideas than I ever could. But that doesn't mean that these incantations are all bad, because that is simply not the case. The fire and lightning incantations are able to one-shot the amalgams, which make them almost a
Eso sí es cierto. Las incantaciones de literalmente el de fuego, especialmente la eléctrica, literalmente desintegra la amalgama. O sea, más literalmente siento yo que básicamente esa madre, la de la encantación eléctrica, que es algo que debía haber hecho cuando reuní de Citadelle ayer, que yo de pendejo no lo hice, fue sacar esa madre para deshacerme de las amalgamas así rápido, güey. Porque, o sea, esa madre, no importa en qué ronda estés, esa cosa desintegra cualquier cosa, güey, literal. Eso es algo que debía haber hecho, pero pues yo de pendejo no lo hice. Pero, sí, güey, literalmente, ahí sí, literalmente sí tiene un muy buen punto que yo también comparto. Que básicamente, literalmente esas secundarias de aquí, las encantaciones, sí están más o menos OP. Algunas no tanto como por ejemplo ¿cómo es la de Medkit? Y la de, ¿cuál era la otra? La de oscuridad, casi no tanto. Casi no tanto son OP, pero la de fuego y la de electricidad, esas madres sí están rotas de a madre. Sí están muy rotas y a la vez siento yo que están, bueno, iba a decir balanceadas, pero en cierta parte no, porque si llevas Vulture con el augment de que cuando haces kills te suelta tu mismo equipamiento, ahí sí o sí está un poco desbalanceado. Pero si no lo llevas, siento yo que está muy bien balanceado esa madre ahí.
Must have during a Citadelle playthrough, and I think that Treyarch did a great job placing incantation chests all around the map, giving players the ability to cycle through them rapidly, meaning that they are meant to be used constantly and to help pick apart the hordes while also replenishing quickly using the Vulture Picky Eater augment. In summary, it's not that these incantations are bad or that they don't have a use case, it's just another missed opportunity in terms of the main quest steps, the lack of bombastic effects, and not playing to the strength of the castle history and individual lore of the map. After the plethora of side content in both Terminus and Liberty Falls, I was hoping for the same level of detail from Treyarch inside of Citadelle de More.
Ok, esto es interesante, güey, porque, o sea, yo nunca he visto los side quests de Citadel, por lo cual, pues, a ver, güey. A ver qué After tiene para mí, güey, porque, o sea, literalmente recuerdo que literalmente iba a ver los side quests de Citadel, pero nunca los vi, así que, pues, a ver. Sé que obviamente estoy seguro que no va a mostrar todos, pero de seguro va a mostrar los más interesantes, a ver.
Fortunately, in a similar fashion to the atmospheric depth story and main
Comandos,
quest,
bienvenido
the
al
side
stream.
content is really just mediocre. And while there really are a lot of side quests to complete, they're mostly just a way to get free perks, and there's nothing that really takes advantage of the map's atmosphere and castle magic. Of course, it's great to have ammo mods, free perks, and all the loot, but making things a little meatier would have been nice. There are a lot of fluff side quests that didn't just seem to really do anything. Things like lighting a bunch of fireplaces which shoot fireballs at the zombies for a few minutes, or firing yourself out of the lion cannon 100 times. What are the purpose of any of these? Sure, I suppose they can be fun, but do they add to the story? Is it just an inside joke for the developers? Like, I just don't understand. I would like to know if there is a little more to it. Other quests like bartending, the chess piece, and the Rat King Easter eggs are much better, but I would still...
Espérate, ¿estás en blanco y negro? No, güey. Aquí estoy viendo aquí el stream y pues... Estoy viendo aquí el stream, está todo bien, güey. No sé tu panel o algo así. Estamos viendo una retrospectiva, güey, al mapa que estábamos jugando el día de ayer en Black Ops 6 Zombies, el Citadelle de Morts. Una retrospectiva.
Argue they're just okay. A map of this stature needs to have epic side quests along the more silly or purposeless content in order to balance out the character of the map, especially when there is a moody atmosphere at play. This is why out of all of the side content that there is in Citadel, the Lockdown in the Undercroft is clearly the best side quest, as it builds off of the lore and mythos of the map by using the alchemy symbols on the wall alongside the incantations. And while the reward for doing this isn't anything special, it's better than nothing. But that's not really what's important here, because what I truly hope for more than anything is that Treyarch continues to build out quests like this, because if they are going to focus on accessibility in spite of things like art direction, the main quest, and narrative exposition, the least they can do is satiate the hardcore player base by building out challenging and meaningful side Easter egg content that rewards players with special weapons, or secret content that extrapolates and expands on the map itself. When looking back at the rich history of Call of Duty Zombies, there is example after example where Treyarch rewards and creates payoffs for player curiosity. And that curiosity was devised solely off of bits and pieces that were inside of the unique world that game devs had imagined for us. Developers used to make the best of a location and dive in deep to show off how clever they were by almost daring players to go to great lengths to uncover their secrets. Whereas in
Confirmo, sobre todo en literalmente los inicios de Zombies con World at War y Black Ops 1, literalmente quería que literalmente exploráramos, güey, cada jodido centímetro de los mapas para descubrir todos sus secretos, güey. Ahí sí o sí confirmo eso, literalmente. Lo confirmo bastante.
Citadel, things feel almost random or disconnected from the core lore, making it seem like if you want to learn about the map itself, you need to read a blog post as opposed to simply playing it. That being said, despite of the more glaring flaws inside of Citadelle de More, it really is a great map. However, it does seem as if Treyarch just did the bare minimum, not in terms of gameplay design or the systems inside of the map, but more so regarding the main quest and narrative functions compared to what they used to be able to get away with before this modern era of Call of Duty Zombies. Little details are what help mend the seams of any artistic vision, no matter if it's movies, music, or video games. And I can't help but feel like that is just completely missing here. Because for better or worse, Treyarch has defined what we can expect from here on out. A focus on accessibility, a more grounded, realistic approach to things, simpler Easter eggs, and less spectacle. And so in terms of fulfilling the duty of DLC 1, was Treyarch successful? Well, I think the answer is yes. This is the new era of zombies, and these are the expectations players need to now manage for the remainder of the Black Ops 6 season. And while that's not inherently a bad thing, it does make me less excited about the future maps in terms of their magnificence. Fortunately, Citadelle de More's execution of base gameplay, wonder weapons, and the boss battle are exceptionally fun, but I can't help but wonder how much greater things would have been if Treyarch lathered an epic coat of paint on top of this dilapidated castle, elevating things to a whole other level.
Eso sí, literalmente, no me quiero ni imaginar lo que Treyarch pudo haber hecho con todas las oportunidades que, a ver, no son oportunidades, repito, que hubiesen fallado o que hubiesen sido tan relevantes, pero sí hubiesen sido conceptos interesantes. Me alegra que tienes inglés al igual que yo. Bueno, pues a ver, ya quedó, la el gameplay trailer de Black Ops 6 de The Tomb, que está aquí. Parece que están acá, no lo he cerrado. Y la retrospectiva hacia Afterlife con Citadelle Morts, que por cierto, un like. Le quedó con madre, literalmente. Literalmente este güey tiene un nivel de edición de puta madre, literalmente. Literalmente un contenido impresionante este güey.